Imagine this. You're sitting in one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, watching a wealthy teenager pour an entire glass of expensive wine over a hard-working waitress, while his parents laugh and applaud. The humiliation burns across her face as red wine drips from her uniform. But what happened next? Well, let me tell you. Karma has a way of delivering justice in the most unexpected ways. And this story? It's going to show you exactly how the universe balances the scales when you think money makes you untouchable. If you've ever felt powerless watching someone abuse their privilege, if you've ever wondered whether good people really do get their moment of justice, then you need to hear what happened that night. Because sometimes, the person you're stepping on is exactly the one who holds the power to change your entire world. Hit that like button if you believe in karma, and let me take you back to where this incredible story began. It was a Tuesday evening in October when Sarah Chin clocked in for what she thought would be just another shift at Le Bernardin, one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants. At 22, Sarah had been working there for 8 months, juggling her job with her final year of nursing school. Every dollar she earned went toward her tuition, her mother's medical bills, and the tiny apartment she shared with 2 roommates in Queens. Sarah wasn't just any waitress. She was known among the staff for her grace under pressure, her ability to remember every detail of an order without writing it down, and a genuine warmth that made even the most demanding customer soften. The management loved her because complaints dropped to 0 whenever she was on shift. Her fellow servers loved her because she always had their backs, covering tables when someone was overwhelmed or sick. But tonight was different. Tonight, the Blackwell family had reserved the corner table in her section. Marcus Blackwell III was 17 years old, and everything wrong with old money wrapped up in a designer suit. His parents, Marcus Jr. and Victoria, were Manhattan real estate royalty, the kind of people who owned buildings most New Yorkers could only dream of entering. They'd raised their son to believe that money didn't just buy things. It bought people, respect, and immunity from consequences. As Sarah approached their table with menus, she noticed Marcus scrolling through his phone, completely ignoring her presence. His parents were deep in conversation about their latest acquisition, a historic brownstone they planned to convert into luxury condos. "Good evening," Sarah said with her professional smile. "Welcome to Le Bernardin. I'm Sarah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Marcus finally looked up, his eyes scanning her from head to toe in a way that made her skin crawl. "Yeah, whatever. Just bring us your most expensive wine. Price doesn't matter." He turned to his parents. "See, I told you this place would know how to treat us right." Victoria laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Marcus, darling, you're learning so well. Always show them who's in charge from the start." Sarah's professional smile never wavered, but inside, something cold settled in her stomach. She'd served plenty of wealthy families before, but there was something different about the Blackwells, something cruel lurking beneath their polished exterior. "Certainly," she replied smoothly. "I'll have our sommelier come speak with you about our wine selection." "No," Marcus said sharply. "I said you bring us the most expensive wine. Are you too stupid to understand simple instructions?" The nearby tables went quiet. Sarah felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but she'd dealt with difficult customers before. "Of course. I'll bring you our 2005 Chateau Lupin Bordeaux. It's $800 a bottle." "Perfect," Marcus Sr. said, not looking up from his phone. "And we'll need 3 glasses. Marcus here is learning to appreciate the finer things." Sarah knew the legal drinking age was 21, but at a place like Le Bernardin, questioning wealthy customers about their choices was a fast way to lose your job. She nodded and headed to the wine cellar, her mind already calculating how the commission from this table would help with her mother's next medical payment. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had already decided to make her evening a nightmare. As soon as she walked away, he leaned across the table toward his parents. "Watch this," he whispered. "I bet I can make her cry before dessert." His mother's eyes lit up with interest. "Oh, Marcus, you're terrible. But what did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet. But these people live for our tips, right? Let's see how far she'll go to keep us happy. If you think this was just teenage cruelty, you haven't heard anything yet. because what the Blackwell family was about to unleash would test not just Sarah's patience, but her strength in ways they never could have imagined. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this story is just getting started. Sarah returned with the wine, performing the traditional presentation with the grace of someone who'd done this hundreds of times. She poured a small amount for Marcus Sr. to taste, waiting patiently as he swirled it and nodded his approval. As she filled their glasses, Marcus suddenly spoke up. "You know, I'm not sure this is the right wine after all. What else do you have that's expensive?" Sarah paused, the bottle still in her hand. "This is actually one of our finest selections, sir. But if you'd prefer something different, I'd be happy to show you our wine menu." No, Marcus said, waving his hand dismissively. "I want you to tell me, what's the most expensive thing you have? I want to know you actually understand what we're ordering." Sarah felt the trap closing, but she had no choice but to step into it. "We have a 1947 Chateau Latour that's $12,000, but—" "12,000. Marcus laughed loud enough that other diners turned to stare. "Did you hear that, Dad? She thinks 12,000 is expensive. God, these people really don't understand money, do they?" Sarah's face flushed, but she kept her voice level. "It's certainly one of our premium selections. Would you like to see the wine menu to consider your options?" "Actually," Victoria chimed in, "I think this wine is perfect. Don't you agree, Marcus? Sometimes you have to educate these people about quality." Marcus picked up his glass, swirling the deep red wine thoughtfully. "You're right, Mother. Education is important." He looked directly at Sarah. "Tell me, what do you think of this wine?" Sarah sensed a loaded question, but had no choice but to answer. "It's a beautiful vintage, sir. The 2005 Sierra Leonean Leon's Pin is known for its complexity and depth." "Complexity?" Marcus repeated mockingly. "How would you know? I bet you've never tasted anything like this in your entire life." "No, sir, I haven't," Sarah admitted honestly. "But I've studied our wine list extensively." "Studied?" Victoria laughed. "How adorable. Book learning versus actual experience. There's really no substitute for the real thing, is there, darling?" Marcus stood up abruptly, still holding his wine glass. Sarah stepped back instinctively, but there wasn't far to go in the narrow space between tables. "You know what?" Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly across the restaurant. "I think you need a real education about this wine. Here's your lesson." And then, in front of 50 other diners, Marcus Blackwell poured the entire glass of $800 wine over Sarah's head. The restaurant went dead silent. Red wine dripped from Sarah's hair, staining her white uniform shirt, pooling on the marble floor around her feet. The liquid was cold against her scalp, and she could smell the earthy, expensive scent that now soaked her completely. But what happened next was somehow worse than the wine itself. The Blackwell family erupted in laughter. "Oh my God, Marcus!" Victoria gasped between giggles. Her face. Did you see her face? Marcus Sr. was laughing so hard he was wiping tears from his eyes. "Son, that was perfect. Absolutely perfect." The look of shock priceless. Young Marcus took a theatrical bow. "Ladies and gentlemen, that's how you give someone an education they'll never forget." Sarah stood there, dripping and humiliated, as wine continued to stain the expensive carpet. Other diners stared in shock, some pulling out phones to record what was happening. The shame burned hotter than any physical pain she'd ever felt. But here's what the Blackwell family didn't know. They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because Sarah Chun wasn't just any waitress. And this restaurant, it wasn't just any restaurant. If you think you know where the story is going, trust me, you don't. Hit that like button, and let me show you exactly what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. The restaurant manager, David Laurent, appeared at Sarah's side within seconds. His face was a mask of professional calm, but Sarah could see the fury burning in his eyes. David had worked in high-end hospitality for 20 years, and he'd never seen anything like this. "Miss Chun," he said quietly, "please go to the break room and get cleaned up. We'll handle this." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. As she walked through the dining room, wine still dripping from her uniform, she heard Marcus call out behind her, "Don't forget to bring us a new bottle. Same vintage. And maybe learn some grace while you're back there." The laughter from their table followed her all the way to the staff area. In the break room, Sarah caught sight of herself in the mirror and felt her knees go weak. Her hair was plastered to her head. Her white shirt was completely purple, and her black slacks were soaked through. She looked like she'd been dunked in a vat of grape juice. But it wasn't the appearance that broke her heart. It was the memory of the laughter, the way they'd found her humiliation so entertaining, the casual cruelty of it all. Sarah had worked since she was 14 years old. She'd endured condescending customers, impossible demands, and brutal shifts, all while maintaining perfect grades in nursing school. She'd cleaned hotel rooms, where guests left messes that would make you sick. She'd served coffee to people who treated her like furniture. But she'd never, ever been deliberately humiliated like this. As she tried to clean the wine from her hair with paper towels, Sarah thought about her mother lying in the hospital bed 3 boroughs away, about the medical bills that kept growing, about her nursing school graduation that was only 6 months away, about all the dreams she was working toward that required her to keep this job. The tears came then, hot and fast and angry. But what Sarah didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone had been watching everything from across the restaurant. Someone who recognized her. Someone who was about to change everything. Dr. Margaret Chen had been enjoying a quiet dinner with her husband when she witnessed the entire humiliating scene. And yes, you heard that name correctly. Dr. Margaret Chen wasn't just any customer. She was the head of nursing at Mount Sinai Hospital, one of the most prestigious medical centers in New York City. And Sarah was her niece. Now, before you think this is going to be some simple family revenge story, let me tell you something about Dr. Chen. She was known throughout the medical community not just for her skill, but for her principles. She didn't use her position to settle personal scores. She believed in justice, not vengeance. But she also knew something about the Blackwell family that would make their wine-pouring stunt look like child's play. Back in the dining room, Marcus was holding court, retelling the story of his education lesson to anyone who would listen. Other tables were pointedly ignoring them, but the Blackwells were too intoxicated by their own cruelty to notice. "You should have seen her face when the wine hit," Marcus said for the 3rd time, like she'd never been taught a lesson in her life. "The poor thing probably makes more in tips tonight than her parents make in a month," Victoria added. "We really did her a favor, showing her how the real world works." David Laurent approached their table, his expression carefully neutral. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwell, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to settle your bill and leave." Marcus Sr. looked up in surprise. "Excuse me, we're paying customers. We've done nothing wrong." "Sir, you assaulted one of our staff members. This is grounds for immediate removal and a potential police report." "Assault?" Victoria laughed. "It was wine, not acid. Don't be so dramatic." "And besides," Marcus Jr. added, standing up to face the manager, "do you know who we are? We own half the buildings on this block. One phone call from me, and this place loses its lease." David's expression didn't change. "Sir, I need you to leave now, or I'll be calling security." "Fine," Marcus Sr. said, throwing his napkin on the table. "But you'll be hearing from our lawyers, and you can forget about any of our business associates ever setting foot in this place again." As the Blackwell family gathered their things, making loud comments about staff training and knowing your place, Dr. Margaret Chen quietly stood up from her table across the room. She'd made a decision, but it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, and it was going to be beautiful. Make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next will restore your faith in karma. 20 minutes later, Sarah emerged from the break room in a spare uniform, her hair still damp but clean. She'd managed to stop crying, but her hands were still shaking slightly as she tied her apron. David Laurent was waiting for her with a concerned expression. "Sarah, how are you feeling? Do you want to go home for the night?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "I need the money from tonight's shift. I can't afford to leave early." "The Blackwells have been removed from the restaurant," David said, "and I want you to know that we're considering a ban on them ever returning." Sarah nodded, But she'd heard promises like this before. Wealthy customers had a way of making problems disappear with enough money and connections. She'd learned not to expect real consequences for people like the Blackwells. What she didn't expect was for Dr. Margaret Chin to approach her as she was setting up a new table. "Excuse me," the older woman said gently. "Are you Sarah Chin?" Sarah looked up, surprised. The woman looked familiar, but she couldn't place her. "Yes, I am. Have we met?" Dr. Chin smiled warmly. "I'm your Aunt Margaret, your mother's sister." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. She'd heard about her Aunt Margaret her entire life. The successful doctor who'd moved to Manhattan years ago and rarely visited the family in Queens. Their mother had always spoken of her sister with a mixture of pride and sadness, proud of her success, but hurt by the distance that had grown between them over the years. "Aunt Margaret? I didn't recognize you. What are you doing here?" "Having dinner with my husband," Dr. Chin said, "and witnessing something that made my blood boil." Her expression grew serious. "Sarah, I saw what those people did to you. Are you all right?" Sarah felt fresh tears threatening. "I'm fine. It's just part of the job, you know. Some customers are difficult." "No," Dr. Chin said firmly. "What happened to you was not just difficult customers. It was assault, and it was completely unacceptable." She paused. "Sarah, I need to ask you something. Are you still planning to become a nurse?" "Yes," Sarah said immediately. "I graduate in 6 months. It's all I've ever wanted." Dr. Chin nodded thoughtfully. "And you're paying your own way through school?" Sarah flushed with embarrassment. "Mom's medical bills have been expensive, and with her not being able to work, yes, I'm covering tuition myself." "Your mother never told me you were in nursing school," Dr. Chin said softly. "She never told me about her medical bills either." The awkward family silence stretched between them. Sarah had always wondered why her successful aunt had stayed so distant from their struggles, but she'd never wanted to judge. "Look," Dr. Chin said, "I know your mother, and I haven't been as close as we should be. That's my fault, and I plan to fix it. But right now, I want to focus on you. What happened tonight was wrong, and I want to help make it right." "There's nothing to make right," Sarah said quickly. "They're gone, and I still have a job. That's what matters." Dr. Chin studied her niece's face, the determination mixed with exhaustion, the strength that had been forged through years of struggling. "Sarah, how would you feel about never having to worry about tuition again?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if I told you there was a full scholarship waiting for you to finish nursing school? And not just any nursing program, a direct pathway into Mount Sinai's graduate nursing program after graduation." Sarah stared at her aunt in disbelief. That's not possible. Those scholarships don't exist." "They do when you're the head of nursing at Mount Sinai," Dr. Chin said with a smile. "Sarah, you've clearly got the work ethic and the heart for this profession. I've been watching you handle the situation tonight, and I'm impressed by your grace under pressure. That's exactly what we need in healthcare." But here's where the story gets really interesting, because Dr. Chin had another reason for wanting to help her niece, and it had everything to do with the Blackwell family's biggest secret. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more amazing stories, because you're about to find out why the Blackwells picked the worst possible person to humiliate. 3 days later, Sarah was sitting in Dr. Chen's office at Mount Sinai, still trying to process everything that had happened. The scholarship papers were real. The direct pathway to graduate school was real. For the first time in years, Sarah's future felt secure. "Aunt Margaret," Sarah said, "I can't thank you enough for this. But I have to ask, why now? We haven't seen each other since I was 12. Dr. Chin leaned back in her chair. "Because I realized I've been a terrible sister and an even worse aunt. Your mother never asked me for help because she was too proud, and I never offered because I was too busy. But also," she paused, "because I think you deserve to know something about the family that humiliated you." Sarah's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "The Blackwell family has been trying to buy the land under Mount Sinai Hospital for 3 years, Dr. Chin explained. "They want to demolish the entire medical complex and build luxury condos. They've made increasingly aggressive offers, and when those didn't work, they've been trying to force us out through other means." Other means? Health code violations that mysteriously appear after inspections. Zoning challenges that slow down our expansion projects. Medical supply companies suddenly changing their contracts. They're trying to make it impossible for us to operate, so we'll be forced to sell. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. And you knew this when you saw them pour wine on me? I knew exactly who they were, Dr. Chen confirmed. Marcus Blackwell Jr. personally threatened me in a meeting last month. He told me that people who stand in his way have a tendency to find their lives becoming very difficult. So this scholarship, it's revenge? No, Dr. Chen said firmly. This scholarship is because you earned it, and because I should have been helping your family years ago. But what happens next? That's where things get interesting. Dr. Chen pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. Sarah, I need to tell you about someone else who's going to be part of your life now. Someone the Blackwell family is going to wish they'd never met. The folder contained information about Dr. James Patterson, the chief of surgery at Mount Sinai, and one of the most respected surgeons in the country. His photo showed a distinguished man in his 50s, with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair. Dr. Patterson has been leading the fight against the Blackwell family's attempts to buy the hospital land, Dr. Chen explained. He's also the man who convinced the Nursing Scholarship Committee to approve your application immediately. I don't understand. He doesn't even know me. He knows about you, Dr. Chen said. I told him what happened at the restaurant, and about your academic record. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know about Dr. Patterson. Dr. Chen leaned forward. He's been looking for someone with exactly your qualifications for a very special project. A community health initiative that's going to launch next year. It focuses on providing medical care to underserved communities, people exactly like your family who can't afford quality health care. Sarah's heart started racing. What kind of project? A mobile clinic program that brings advanced medical care directly into low-income neighborhoods, free of charge, funded by a combination of federal grants and private donations. Dr. Chen smiled. Dr. Patterson has been trying to get this program approved for 2 years. The only thing standing in his way has been the hospital's budget constraints. I still don't understand what this has to do with me. The program needs community liaison, someone who understands what it's like to struggle for health care, someone who can connect with patients who don't trust hospitals or doctors, someone with nursing training but also real-world experience. Dr. Chun paused. The position pays $70,000 a year, starting immediately upon graduation. Sarah felt dizzy. Aunt Margaret, this is too much. I can't accept all of this. You're not accepting charity, Sarah. You're accepting opportunity. But there's one more thing you should know about this position. Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. The mobile clinic program requires city permits, health department approvals, and community board support. Guess who sits on the community board for Queens and has been blocking these permits for 2 years? Sarah's blood went cold. The Blackwell family? Marcus Blackwell Sr. has been using his political connections to prevent any free healthcare programs from operating in areas where he owns property. He claims they're bad for property values and attract the wrong element. The pieces were falling into place, and Sarah could see the bigger picture forming. This wasn't just about a cruel teenager pouring wine. This was about a family that had been systematically trying to keep healthcare away from people like her mother. So when I take this position, Sarah began, when you take this position, you'll be working directly to provide free healthcare to communities the Blackwells are trying to gentrify. You'll be fighting for people they're trying to push out. And Sarah, Dr. Chen's eyes gleamed. You'll be very, very good at it. If you're thinking this sounds like the setup for an epic showdown, you're absolutely right. Hit that like button because the revenge is about to get very, very sweet. 6 months later, Sarah Chen stood in her cap and gown at her nursing school graduation, her mother and Aunt Margaret cheering from the audience. She graduated summa cum laude and had already started her orientation at Mount Sinai Hospital. The mobile clinic program had been approved 3 months earlier, after a community campaign that Sarah had helped organize. Neighborhood by neighborhood, They'd gathered support from local residents who desperately needed better healthcare access. The permits had finally been pushed through despite the Blackwell family's political pressure. On her first official day as community liaison, Sarah was setting up a mobile clinic in a Queens neighborhood just 6 blocks from where she'd grown up. The converted van contained state-of-the-art medical equipment and was staffed with 2 nurses, a physician assistant, and a rotating schedule of volunteer doctors. Dr. Patterson had driven out from Manhattan to see the first day of operation. "Sarah," he said, watching her efficiently organize the patient intake system, "I think this program is going to be even more successful than we hoped." "The community response has been incredible," Sarah replied. "We've got 47 people signed up for appointments today alone." What Sarah didn't mention was that she'd been working 18-hour days for the past month, going door to door in the neighborhood, explaining the program in 3 different languages, building trust with families who'd been let down by the healthcare system before. She also didn't mention that her mother was their first patient, finally getting the comprehensive cardiac care she'd needed for 2 years, but couldn't afford. Dr. Patterson checked his watch. "I hate to leave, but I've got surgery in 2 hours. Think you can handle the rest of the day?" "Absolutely," Sarah said confidently. And she meant it. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. She was reviewing patient files when she heard a commotion outside the van. Through the window, she could see a black Mercedes pulling up with tinted windows. 3 people got out, and Sarah's blood turned to ice. Marcus Blackwell III, now 18 and clearly still an entitled brat, was walking toward the mobile clinic with his parents flanking him. They looked like they were on a mission. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped outside the van to meet them. She was wearing her new Mount Sinai uniform, her nursing credentials prominently displayed, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. She looked nothing like the wine-soaked waitress they'd humiliated 6 months earlier. "Excuse me," Marcus Sr. called out. "We need to speak with whoever's running this operation. We have concerns about this clinic operating in this neighborhood." Sarah walked toward them with calm confidence. "I'm Sarah Chun, Community Liaison for the Mount Sinai Mobile Clinic program. How can I help you?" The family stared at her for several seconds, clearly trying to place where they'd seen her before. Sarah watched recognition slowly dawn on their faces, especially young Marcus, whose complexion went pale. "You," Victoria breathed. "You're that waitress from Lou Bernardine." "Former waitress," Sarah corrected pleasantly. "I'm a registered nurse now. And you're the Blackwell family. I believe we've met." Marcus III looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. His parents, however, seemed to think they still held the upper hand. "Well," Marcus Sr. said, recovering his composure, "I suppose this explains why this clinic appeared in our neighborhood without proper consultation, using your new position to settle old scores." Sarah smiled, and there was nothing fake about it. "Actually, Mr. Blackwell, this clinic is here because the community requested it. We've had overwhelming support from local residents who need healthcare access. I'm just here to make sure they get it." "This neighborhood doesn't need charity healthcare," Victoria said sharply. "It needs proper development, quality establishments, not some van bringing in more problems." "With respect, Mrs. Blackwell," Sarah replied, "I grew up 3 blocks from here. I know exactly what this neighborhood needs, and it's not more luxury condos." Young Marcus finally found his voice. "Look, about what happened at the restaurant." "What about it?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious to hear what he'd say. We were," he stammered, looking desperately at his parents for help, but his parents weren't interested in apologies. Marcus Sr. stepped forward aggressively. "Miss Chun, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this clinic doesn't have proper permits for this location. I've checked." Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him a document. "Actually, we have all required permits, approved by the City Health Department, the Community Board, and the Zoning Commission, all signed and dated." "The Community Board didn't approve this," Marcus Sr. said firmly. "I would have known." "You're right that you would have known," Sarah said, "if you'd been at the meeting. But according to the public records, you've missed the last 6 Community Board meetings. The approval was unanimous among the members, who actually showed up to represent their communities. The satisfaction Sarah felt wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about proving that healthcare was a right, not a privilege. It was about showing that working-class people deserved the same quality medical care as those who could afford private physicians. But the Blackwell family wasn't done trying to intimidate her. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," Victoria said, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "We own property all over this city. We have connections that go all the way to City Hall. This little clinic of yours can disappear with one phone call." Sarah looked Victoria directly in the eye. "Mrs. Blackwell, you're absolutely right that you have connections. But you know what I have? I have 57 patients who showed up today for free health care. I have a community that supports this program. I have medical credentials from one of the most respected hospitals in the country. And I have something else you might not be aware of." Sarah paused dramatically. "I have documentation of every attempt your family has made to block healthcare access in low-income neighborhoods. Every permit challenge, every zoning complaint, every political favor called in to keep medical care away from poor people. Dr. Patterson and I have been building quite a comprehensive file." The Blackwell family exchanged worried glances. "You see," Sarah continued, "when you poured wine on my head, you thought you were putting a poor waitress in her place. What you were actually doing was motivating a future healthcare advocate to pay very close attention to your family's business practices. And some of those practices? Well, they might interest journalists who cover healthcare policy." Marcus Sr.'s face was turning red. "Are you threatening us?" "Not at all," Sarah said sweetly. "I'm just letting you know that transparency in healthcare access is very important to me. If you'd like to discuss how your family can support better medical care for underserved communities, I'm always happy to talk. Otherwise, I have patients waiting." She turned to walk back toward the mobile clinic, but young Marcus called out desperately, "Wait, please, I want to apologize for what I did at the restaurant. It was wrong and I'm sorry." Sarah turned back to look at him. For the first time, his apology sounded genuine. "Marcus, do you know why what you did was wrong?" "Because I humiliated you in public. Because I was cruel for no reason." "That's part of it," Sarah agreed. "But do you know why it really mattered?" Marcus looked confused. "It mattered because I was working 3 jobs to pay for nursing school, so I could help people who can't afford health care. Every dollar I made that night was going toward either my education or my mother's medical bills. When you poured wine on me, you weren't just humiliating a waitress. You were attacking someone who was trying to become a nurse, trying to take care of her sick mother, trying to make health care more accessible for people like us." She gestured toward the mobile clinic. "This is what I was working toward. This is what every shift I worked was building toward. Your cruelty didn't stop me, but it did teach me something important about how wealth can make people forget that service workers are human beings with dreams and goals and families who depend on them." Marcus looked genuinely ashamed. "I never thought about any of that." "I know you didn't. That's the problem." The young man was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is there anything I can do to make up for what I did?" Sarah considered this. She could have humiliated him the way he'd humiliated her. She could have demanded money, or an apology, or public acknowledgement of his cruelty. But looking at him now, she saw something different. She saw a teenager who'd been raised with terrible values, but who might, maybe, be capable of learning better. "There is something you can do," she said finally. "Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what Sarah asked for is going to surprise you. I want you to volunteer here," Sarah said. "1 day a week for the next 6 months. You'll help with patient intake, clean medical equipment, restock supplies, and assist with community outreach." Marcus's parents looked horrified. "Absolutely not," Victoria said immediately. "Marcus has commitments. School, social obligations, family business." "Mom," Marcus interrupted quietly. "I want to do it." Sarah was surprised. She'd expected him to refuse or make excuses. "You want to what?" his father demanded. "I want to volunteer here," Marcus repeated, looking at Sarah. "You're right that I never thought about any of it. about what it meant that you were working to become a nurse, or that you had a sick mother. I never think about what service workers are going through in their real lives. He paused. Maybe I should. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. Marcus, this is ridiculous. You're not going to work in some charity clinic in Queens. What would people think? Maybe they'd think I'm learning something useful, Marcus replied. Maybe they'd think I'm finally growing up. Sarah studied his face carefully. Marcus, this isn't a joke. The work is hard, the hours are long, and our patients deserve respect and dignity. If you're not serious about this, don't offer. I'm serious, he said. I need to understand what I did wrong, really understand it, and I think working here might help me figure that out. Marcus Sr. grabbed his son's arm. We're leaving. Now. This conversation is over. But Marcus pulled away. Dad, I'm 18. You can't make me leave. If you stay here, don't expect any support from us, Victoria threatened, financial or otherwise. Marcus looked at his parents, then at Sarah, then at the mobile clinic where patients were waiting for care. Then I guess I'll figure out how to support myself. Sarah felt a flicker of respect for the young man. Marcus, if you're serious about this, you need to understand something. I'm not going to take it easy on you because you're sorry, or because your parents have money. You'll be treated exactly like every other volunteer. You'll work hard, you'll show up on time, and you'll treat every patient with complete respect. I understand. And if you mess up, if you show any of the entitled attitude you showed that night at the restaurant, you're gone. No second chances. Marcus nodded. I understand that too. His parents stood there in shock as their son asked Sarah for volunteer application forms. Marcus Blackwell, Jr., Sarah said, turning to address his father. Your son just made the first mature decision I've seen from your family. You should be proud of him. We'll see how long this lasts, Marcus Sr. muttered. We certainly will, Sarah agreed. But Marcus, if you're serious about this, be here Tuesday at 7 a.m. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty, and bring a willingness to work. As the family walked back to their Mercedes, minus young Marcus, who stayed behind to fill out paperwork, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected. Not satisfaction or revenge, but hope. Hope that people could change. Hope that understanding could grow from the worst situations. Hope that justice didn't always have to mean punishment. Over the next 6 months, Marcus Blackwell III became one of their most reliable volunteers. He showed up early, stayed late, and worked harder than anyone expected. He learned to take blood pressure readings, to comfort scared children getting vaccinations, and to help elderly patients fill out insurance forms. More importantly, he learned to listen. He listened to Mrs. Rodriguez talk about rationing her diabetes medication because she couldn't afford the full prescription. He listened to Mr. Kim explain why he'd been ignoring chest pains for 6 months, because missing work for a doctor's appointment meant his family couldn't pay rent. He listened to teenage mothers talk about their fears of not being able to afford prenatal care. And slowly, Marcus began to understand what Sarah had been trying to teach him. He began to see that every person who walked through their mobile clinic doors was someone with hopes and dreams and families and struggles, someone whose dignity mattered, someone who deserved better than the world was giving them. The transformation wasn't immediate, and it wasn't perfect. Marcus still caught himself making assumptions about people based on their appearance or accent. He still had moments of impatience when things moved slowly or got complicated. But he was learning, and more importantly, he was beginning to use his family's resources for good. 6 months after that confrontation in Queens, Marcus approached Sarah with a proposal. What if we expanded the program, he asked. What if we had multiple mobile clinics covering different neighborhoods? Sarah looked up from the patient files she was organizing. Marcus, mobile clinics are expensive. Each one costs about $200,000 to equip and staff. What if money wasn't the limiting factor? Marcus asked quietly. Sarah studied his face. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that my trust fund could probably buy and equip 5 mobile clinics. Maybe 10, if we're smart about it. Sarah stared at him. Marcus, that's not how trust funds work. Your parents would never approve that kind of expenditure. Marcus smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Sarah had ever seen from him. That's the thing about turning 18 and having your own trust fund. They can't stop me from spending my own money on whatever I think is important. And you think mobile healthcare is important? I think, Marcus said carefully, that watching Mrs. Rodriguez cry because we helped her get the medication she needed was the first time in my life I felt like I'd done something that actually mattered. So yes, I think it's important. Hit that like button if you believe people can change, because this story is about to show you what real redemption looks like. 1 year after the wine incident, the Mount Sinai Mobile Health Initiative had expanded to 12 clinics serving neighborhoods across 3 boroughs. Marcus Blackwell III had not only funded the expansion, but had convinced several of his wealthy friends to support the program as well. The initiative had served over 3,000 patients in its first year, providing everything from routine checkups to emergency care to chronic disease management. They'd partnered with local community centers, schools, and churches to reach people who'd never had consistent access to health care. Sarah had been promoted to program director, overseeing the entire operation. She was also halfway through her master's degree in public health administration, with her tuition fully covered by a scholarship fund that Marcus had quietly established. But the most surprising development was that Marcus Blackwell Sr. and Victoria had slowly, grudgingly, begun to change their tune about the mobile clinics. It started when Victoria fell and broke her ankle while visiting one of her properties in Queens. The nearest hospital was 40 minutes away, but the Mount Sinai Mobile Clinic was 3 blocks from the accident. When the paramedics suggested taking her to the mobile unit for immediate care, Victoria's first instinct was to refuse. But the pain in her ankle overruled her prejudice. Sarah happened to be working at that particular clinic that day. When she saw Victoria Blackwell being helped into the mobile unit, she felt her stomach clench with old anxiety. But she was a professional now, and this was a patient who needed care. "Mrs. Blackwell," Sarah said calmly, "I'm going to examine your ankle and take some x-rays. We'll also check for any other injuries from the fall." Victoria looked uncomfortable, but didn't refuse treatment. As Sarah gently examined the injured ankle, Victoria found herself watching the efficient, caring way the young nurse worked. "It's not broken," Sarah announced after reviewing the x-rays, "but it's a bad sprain. You'll need to stay off it for at least a week, and you'll need physical therapy once the swelling goes down." As Sarah wrapped Victoria's ankle with professional care, the older woman found herself remembering the terrified waitress from Le Bernardin. The transformation was remarkable. "Sarah," Victoria said quietly, "I owe you an apology." Sarah looked up, surprised. "Mrs. Blackwell, you don't need to." "Yes, I do," Victoria interrupted. "What we did to you that night was unconscionable. I've been watching my son work at these clinics for months, listening to him talk about the patients he's met, and I'm beginning to understand what we really did to you." Sarah continued wrapping the ankle, listening. "We didn't just humiliate a waitress," Victoria continued. "We attacked someone who was working towards something important. Someone who was going to help people we've never even thought about helping." "Mrs. Blackwell, please let me finish." Victoria's voice was shaking slightly. "Marcus, my son, he's become someone I'm proud of for the first time in years. He's learned about hard work, about compassion, about using his advantages to help instead of hurt. And he learned it from you." Sarah finished with the ankle wrap and sat back. "Your son learned it from the patients here, from Mrs. Rodriguez and Mr. Kim and all the people who trusted him to help them. I just gave him the opportunity." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, what would it take to open one of these clinics in Manhattan, in the neighborhoods where people like us live? Sarah was genuinely confused. "Mrs. Blackwell, people in those neighborhoods have excellent access to health care. They can afford private doctors, premium insurance, the best hospitals in the city." "Not all of them," Victoria said softly. "There are people working in our buildings, housekeeping staff, maintenance workers, security guards, who live in Manhattan but can't afford Manhattan healthcare prices. There are elderly people on fixed incomes in rent-control departments who haven't seen a doctor in years because they can't afford the copays." Sarah had never considered this. That's actually a really good point." What if we opened a clinic specifically for building service workers? Free health care for the people who keep the city running, but don't make enough to keep themselves healthy. Sarah stared at Victoria Blackwell in amazement. You're serious about this? I'm serious about trying to make up for some of the damage our family has done. And I'm serious about supporting the work my son has chosen to do. 6 months later, the Manhattan Mobile Health Unit opened in Midtown, specifically serving building workers, restaurant staff, and other service industry employees who worked in the city's most expensive neighborhoods but couldn't afford its healthcare prices. The program was funded by a coalition of building owners, restaurant groups, and private donors organized by Victoria Blackwell, who had thrown herself into healthcare advocacy with the same intensity she'd once devoted to real estate development. The opening day ceremony was held in Central Park, with speeches from Dr. Patterson, Sarah, Marcus, and several patients whose lives had been changed by the mobile clinic program. But the most powerful moment came when Marcus Blackwell III took the microphone for his speech. 2 years ago, he said, I poured wine on a waitress because I thought it was funny to humiliate someone I saw as beneath me. I thought her pain was entertainment. I thought her dignity was something I could take away for my own amusement. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. That waitress was Sarah Chun, who's now the director of this entire program. The night I humiliated her, she was working to pay for nursing school so she could help provide health care to people who couldn't afford it. While I was wasting my parents' money on expensive wine and cruel jokes, she was building something meaningful. Marcus looked directly at Sarah. I learned something important from Sarah that night, even though it took me months to understand what the lesson was. I learned that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Every service worker, every patient, every person you pass on the street is someone's child, someone's parent, someone with dreams and fears and hopes. He paused. The mobile clinic program exists because Sarah refused to let cruelty define her. Instead of using her success to get revenge on my family, she used it to help people who needed health care. She turned my worst behavior into her greatest motivation. Marcus looked out at the crowd. If you take anything from this story, let it be this. How you treat people when you think no one important is watching shows who you really are. And the people you think aren't important, they might just be the ones who change the world. The applause was thunderous, but Sarah was crying too hard to hear it. After the ceremony, as volunteers were cleaning up and patients were getting final checkups, Sarah found herself standing alone with Marcus by the mobile clinic van. Thank you, she said simply. For what? Marcus asked. For proving that people can change. For showing me that forgiveness can lead to something better than revenge. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Sarah, can I ask you something? When you asked me to volunteer here that day, did you know this would happen? Did you know it would change me like this? Sarah considered the question carefully. No, she said honestly. I didn't know if you could change, but I hoped you could. And I figured that if you couldn't, at least you'd do some good work while you were learning that lesson. Marcus laughed. You took a huge risk on me. I took a risk on the person you could become, Sarah corrected, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions I've ever made. As they stood there watching the last patients of the day receive care in Central Park, surrounded by the Manhattan skyline, Sarah reflected on how far they'd all traveled from that night at Le Bernardin. She was no longer a struggling waitress afraid of losing her job. She was a healthcare advocate with a master's degree and a program that was saving lives. Marcus was no longer a cruel teenager who thought money made him untouchable. He was a philanthropist who understood the weight of privilege and responsibility. And his parents, once the embodiment of callous wealth, had become unexpected allies in the fight for healthcare equity. But the most important change wasn't in any of them individually. It was in the proof that justice doesn't always have to come through punishment. Sometimes it comes through transformation. Sometimes the best revenge is refusing to become the thing that hurt you, and instead becoming something that helps heal the world. If you believe that people can change, that forgiveness can be more powerful than revenge, and that justice looks different than we sometimes expect, then this story is for you. Because sometimes the universe doesn't just balance the scales. It tips them towards something better than we could have imagined. And if you've ever felt powerless in the face of cruelty, if you've ever wondered whether kindness is strong enough to stand up to wealth and privilege, then remember Sarah Chun. Remember that the person pouring wine on your head might not realize they're just motivating you to change the world. Make sure you like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about real people overcoming impossible odds, and hit that notification bell because next week, I'm bringing you another story that will restore your faith in humanity. Because in a world that often feels cruel and unfair, sometimes we all need to remember that ordinary people doing extraordinary things can change everything. Sometimes the waitress becomes the healer. Sometimes the bully becomes the advocate. And sometimes justice doesn't come with a hammer. It comes with a stethoscope and a genuine desire to help. The Mount Sinai Mobile Health Initiative now operates in 15 cities across the country, has served over 50,000 patients, and continues to grow every year. Sarah Chun completed her master's in public health and is currently working on policy initiatives to expand mobile healthcare access nationally. Marcus Blackwell III graduated from Columbia with a degree in social work and continues to fund healthcare access programs. He's also spoken at over 100 schools about the importance of treating service workers with dignity and respect. And Victoria and Marcus Blackwell Sr.? They've become major advocates for healthcare equity, funding similar programs in 12 other cities and working to change zoning laws that prevent mobile clinics from operating in high-income neighborhoods. As for Sarah's mother, she's healthy, proud, and working as a patient advocate for the mobile clinic program, helping other families navigate the healthcare system she once couldn't afford to access. Sometimes the best stories aren't about revenge. They're about redemption. They're about transformation. They're about proving that cruelty doesn't have to create more cruelty, and that the choice to build instead of destroy can change not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. That's the real lesson from that night at Le Bernardin. Not that karma will punish your enemies, but that grace and determination can transform them into allies. Not that the universe will always give you justice, but that you have the power to create justice yourself. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person who pours wine on your head ends up funding the clinic that saves your mother's life. That's not karma. That's something much more powerful. That's redemption. Hit like if this story moved you. Subscribe for more incredible true stories. And remember, you never know which moment of cruelty or kindness might change the entire course of someone's life. Choose kindness. Choose growth. Choose to build something better. Because the world is watching, and your choices matter more than you know.